The great hall of the Zinthari Empire glowed with gold and crystal light. Hundreds of alien nobles filled the seats, their shimmering robes and jeweled crowns catching the glow of floating lamps. It was the day they would see the first human in centuries. The entire galaxy had forgotten what humanity truly was. To most of them, humans were nothing more than stories, primitive, reckless creatures who had destroyed themselves long ago. But that day, Captain Ryan Hale stood at the center of the court alone, surrounded by laughter. The aliens whispered to one another, their tones sharp and mocking. The High Consul smirked from his floating chair. "So this is the last human?" "How disappointing. No armor, no weapon, no fear." His voice echoed across the chamber. The nobles joined in laughter, their alien eyes glimmering with amusement. Ryan did not speak. His calm expression unsettled some of them. He simply stood straight, his hands behind his back, his eyes scanning the hall like a man observing children at play. He was wearing a simple uniform, black, worn, and faded. A small silver badge rested over his chest. It bore a single word: Sol. The aliens did not know its meaning. They did not understand the quiet strength it carried. To them it was a symbol of weakness, of something long dead. "Human," the High Consul said with a sneer. "You stand before the most powerful empire in the galaxy. What makes you think you belong here?" Ryan's voice was calm and steady. "I never said I belonged here," he replied. "You brought me," the court murmured. Some laughed again, others whispered in curiosity. The consul frowned. "We brought you to prove a point, that humans are extinct, powerless, forgotten." Ryan looked up at him with quiet eyes. "Then let me prove another point," he said. "That you should have let us stay forgotten." The hall fell silent for a moment. The consul laughed again, waving a hand. "How dramatic. Do you have anything to show us, human? Or are you only words?" Ryan slowly reached into a small pouch at his side. The guards tensed, raising their plasma spears. The consul gestured for them to lower them. "Let him entertain us," he said mockingly. From the pouch, Ryan pulled out a small silver sphere. It was smooth and dull, no larger than an apple. He placed it on the marble floor and stepped back. "This is not a weapon," he said. "It is a reminder." The nobles leaned forward. The sphere began to hum softly, then glow. A faint blue mist spread across the floor. The laughter faded. Then images appeared, holograms made of light and shadow. They saw fire. They saw war. They saw the memory of humanity. The air shook with the sound of thunder. The projection showed fleets of massive ships shaped like blades slicing through darkness. Alien worlds burned. Armies fell. Giants of metal and light tore through planets like paper. The Zinthari nobles gasped. Some stood in disbelief. The sound of human voices echoed through the hall, recorded from a time long before. Their words sharp, fearless, united. Defend every world. Burn none unless they strike first. Show mercy but never forget. The High Consul's laughter vanished. He stared at the images, trembling slightly. This is history," he said, his voice unsteady. Ryan nodded. "It is memory," he answered. "You forgot who we were. You thought time erased us. It only made us quiet." One of the princesses, seated at the right of the throne, watched him closely. Her name was Princess Illyra. She was young, with pale silver skin and deep violet eyes that reflected the holograms. Unlike the others, she did not laugh. Her gaze held curiosity and fear. "What do you want from us?" she asked softly, her voice echoing. Ryan turned his head slightly toward her. "Nothing," he said. "But you wanted something from us once. You wanted peace. You got it. But you never asked why we gave it." The lights from the sphere dimmed. The images faded, leaving the hall in silence. The air felt heavy. The nobles avoided his eyes. The consul's expression hardened, trying to regain control. "Enough of this trickery," he shouted. "Guards, seize him!" The guards moved, but before they could reach Ryan, the sphere on the floor shattered into thousands of tiny pieces, hovering in the air like silver dust. They swirled around him, forming a faint barrier that shimmered with energy. The guards stopped instantly, their weapons useless. Ryan's tone was still calm. "You want to understand humanity," he said quietly. "You think we are weak because we disappeared. But tell me something, how do you laugh at ghosts when you still fear their shadow?" No one answered. The nobles watched, frozen. Princess Illyra stepped forward slightly, her voice trembling. "Where did your kind go?" she asked. Ryan looked up at the grand windows of the hall where the galaxy shone beyond. We went where no empire could follow, he said. We watched, we waited, and now we are here. The High Consul clenched his teeth. You expect us to fear you? Ryan met his gaze. No, he replied softly. I expect you to remember. The silence that followed felt endless. The court that once roared with laughter could no longer find its voice. The guards lowered their weapons slowly. The princesses looked at each other, their faces pale and uncertain. The human stood in the center of it all, calm as stone. The sphere fragments circled around him like small moons, humming with faint light. In that moment, every being in that hall felt something they had not felt in centuries. Unease, respect, and the return of a name they had forgotten to fear. And for the first time in living memory, the alien court of the Zenthari Empire fell completely silent. The alien court was still silent long after the holograms disappeared. The echoes of human thunder lingered in the air like ghosts that refused to fade. The nobles shifted uneasily in their seats, their laughter forgotten, their arrogance drained away. They had mocked the human as if he were a relic of a forgotten past. But now, they stared at him as if they were standing before something they did not understand. Captain Ryan Hale did not speak. He simply stood there, the broken fragments of his silver device floating around him in a soft glow. His eyes were distant, almost sad. To him, this was not about pride. It was about memory, about reminding the galaxy of the truth they had buried beneath centuries of lies and comfort. The High Consul tried to regain his composure. His voice trembled slightly as he spoke. A clever illusion, human. Tricks of light. You think you can frighten the Empire with stories. Ryan finally looked up. Stories? He said calmly. You call memories stories because you were never there. You never saw what fire looked like when it spoke your name. Before anyone could respond, the shards of the sphere pulsed again. Another hologram appeared, unplanned, uncontrolled. This time the images were raw. The room filled with the sound of soldiers shouting, ships tearing through the void, and the rumbling of worlds at war. The hologram showed an ancient battle, a time when humanity stood alone against a galactic alliance that had tried to erase them. Alien fleets surrounded Earth, burning the skies. But the humans did not surrender. The recording showed their response. Giant ships emerging from behind the moon, weapons powered by energy the aliens had never seen. One blast turned the night into daylight. The court flinched as if the explosion had happened before them. Then came the voices again, not of soldiers, but of civilians. A woman's voice spoke through the recording, steady and unbroken. We are not gods. We are not monsters. We are the consequence of your arrogance. Remember that before you ever call us weak again. The projection ended abruptly. The light died. Silence followed once more. Princess Elira rose from her seat. Her voice was soft, but it carried across the hall. That was real, she said. That was no illusion. The High Consul snapped his gaze toward her. Silence, child. You are being deceived, but Elira shook her head. No, I have seen fragments of these events in the restricted archives. The records were hidden, buried. Our historians called them myths. Ryan stepped forward slowly. Not myths, he said. Records. Your ancestors erased them because they feared what they learned from us. The Emperor, an old alien with skin like obsidian glass, finally spoke for the first time. His deep voice filled the room. Why bring this here, human? Why now? Ryan's expression did not change. Because you forgot. You built your peace on our silence. You taught your children to laugh at our name. But peace built on ignorance never lasts. I came to remind you before the next fire begins. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. Are you threatening us? No, Ryan said quietly. I'm warning you. The tension in the air grew heavy again. Guards surrounded him once more, though none dared to attack. Princess Elira stepped down from the dais, her steps slow and graceful. She stopped only a few feet away from him. If what you say is true, she asked, then why hide for so long? Why let us forget? Ryan looked at her, and for a moment his calm expression broke into something softer, something almost human. Because we were tired, he said. We watched the galaxy burn itself again and again. Every empire thinks it is eternal. Every empire becomes dust. Humanity learned that the only way to survive was to disappear. Elira studied him with quiet awe. Around them the nobles whispered, their fear mixing with fascination. For the first time in generations, the Zenthari Empire felt uncertain of its power. Then the High Consul stood again, furious. Enough, he shouted. This is manipulation. Guards, remove him now. The guards hesitated, but duty won over fear. They stepped forward, surrounding Ryan. The silver shards around him flickered as he raised his hand. Do not make me remind you twice, he said calmly. The consul smirked. You wouldn't dare harm us here. Ryan said nothing. The shards pulsed again, and the guards froze in place. Their armor locks engaged automatically. They could not move. Gasps filled the chamber. Ryan walked slowly toward the consul. You think you know power, he said, but you only know control. Humans learned something different. We learned restraint. He stopped just short of the consul, his voice low but sharp. Do not confuse mercy with weakness. For the first time, the consul stepped back. He saw no anger in the human's eyes, only patience. That frightened him more than rage ever could. The Emperor rose again, his tone quieter now. Captain Hale, what is it you want from us? Ryan turned away from the consul and looked up toward the royal balcony where the princesses sat. I want you to see, he said. To understand that the galaxy you built is standing on bones you pretend not to see. The peace you celebrate is only borrowed time. He picked up the now dormant sphere from the floor. The silver fragments fused back together in his hand. The glow faded, leaving only silence. Then, with slow precision, Ryan looked around the hall. You think humanity is gone, he said softly. But every empire that burns leaves smoke. And if you look long enough into the smoke, you'll find us watching. The Emperor nodded once, slowly. There was no more laughter, no more arrogance. Only the faint sound of the chamber breathing again after a long silence. Princess Elira lowered her gaze. Something inside her had changed. She had seen countless warriors, scholars, and kings, but never anyone who carried so much calm within so much danger. As the guards escorted Ryan out, the nobles whispered his name under their breath. Some in fear, some in admiration. The High Consul glared but said nothing. For the first time in living memory, the empire that mocked humanity began to remember. And somewhere deep in the halls of the galaxy, the memory of fire began to stir again. Night fell over the Zenthari capital like a deep violet mist. The floating city shone with light from its countless spires, yet the air around the royal palace felt heavy and tense. The nobles had dispersed, whispering in frightened tones about the human, the echoes of his words. Do not confuse mercy with weakness. Refused to fade from their minds. In his guarded chamber, Captain Ryan Hale sat by the window, watching the twin moons rise over the horizon. His hands rested calmly on his knees. The silver sphere that had once revealed humanity's fire now lay silent beside him. To him it was not a weapon, it was a truth, one the galaxy had buried long ago. Two guards stood outside his door, speaking softly in the alien tongue, unaware that Ryan understood every word. He looks harmless, one said, but the Emperor fears him. The other replied, so do I, that kind of silence. It is the silence before a storm. Ryan smiled faintly. He had heard that tone before, centuries ago in another galaxy on another world. The powerful always mocked the calm until it was too late. A soft sound broke the quiet. The door opened slightly and Princess Elira stepped inside. She wore a simple robe of deep blue, her crown absent, her expression uncertain. The guards did not stop her. No one dared to question the daughter of the Emperor. Ryan did not move. You should not be here, he said gently. I should not, she agreed, closing the door behind her. But I could not sleep. Your words, they do not leave my mind. She stepped closer, the dim moonlight painting her silver skin in shades of white and shadow. I have studied hundreds of worlds, she continued, but never have I seen such strength come from one so alone. Ryan looked at her, his tone calm. Strength is not the absence of fear. It is what you do despite it. Elira sat across from him. The consul says you are dangerous. The Emperor believes you are here to challenge our rule. Ryan shook his head. I am not here to rule. I am here to remind. The galaxy's peace is a fragile illusion. Empires rise and they forget the lessons that built them. Humanity's silence was never surrender. It was observation. She studied him quietly as if trying to see through the stillness in his voice. If humanity is alive, she asked, why send only you? Ryan's gaze returned to the window. Because one voice can travel further than an army, and sometimes one truth is louder than war. For a long time, neither spoke. The quiet between them carried a strange gravity. as if both understood something the rest of the galaxy had missed. The next morning, the palace bells rang. The royal selection ceremony had begun. Once every decade, the princesses of the empire would choose their alliances, selecting warriors, diplomats, or champions to represent their houses. It was a display of unity, pride, and power. But that day, the hall buzzed with uneasy whispers. Everyone's eyes turned toward the human prisoner now brought to stand before the throne. Chains of light bound his wrists. Not real metal, just symbolic restraint to remind him of his place. He stood calmly, unbothered by the humiliation. The emperor's voice echoed through the chamber. Today, our daughters will choose their alliances. They will choose strength worthy of the empire. The nobles clapped, though the sound was weak. The first princess stepped forward, tall and proud, her skin gleaming like emerald crystal. "I choose Captain Ryan Hale," she said. A shocked silence fell. The emperor blinked. "Repeat that," he demanded. "I said," she repeated firmly, "I choose the human." Gasps filled the hall. The high consul rose from his seat in outrage. "This is an insult. He is no champion." Before anyone could respond, the second princess stepped forward. "I too choose Captain Ryan Hale." Then the third. And the fourth. And then finally Princess Illyra. When she spoke, her voice was calm but carried the weight of every heartbeat in the room. "I choose the human, not because he is powerful, but because he is something this court has forgotten. Honorable." The emperor's face darkened. "You defy your father's throne?" Illyra met his gaze without flinching. "No, father. I honor it. The galaxy no longer fears strength born from wisdom. It only respects cruelty. He is not our enemy. He is our mirror." The nobles erupted in chaos. Some shouted in disbelief, others in anger. The high consul shouted above them all, "This is madness. The human has infected their minds." Ryan raised his head slightly. "You cannot infect what was already ready to change," he said softly. The emperor struck his staff to silence the room. "Enough." His voice shook the air. "You think this relic deserves the loyalty of my bloodline?" Ryan met his eyes with quiet defiance. "I never asked for it, but they saw truth when you saw fear." The emperor leaned forward, his tone turning to ice. "If the daughters of the empire betray their own father for a ghost from Earth, then perhaps humanity should have stayed buried." Ryan's chains shimmered and dissolved without warning. He stepped forward slowly. "Perhaps," he said, "but you cannot bury what was never dead." The nobles froze. The air grew still again. Every sound, every breath seemed suspended. The emperor whispered, "What are you?" Ryan's answer was calm, his eyes reflecting the twin moons above the glass ceiling. "I am human." That used to mean something, and soon it will again. The princesses stood beside him, silent but resolute. The guards hesitated, uncertain whether to draw their weapons or bow. The emperor watched them, his fury mixing with fear. For the first time, the throne of the Zenthari Empire felt smaller than the presence of one human. And somewhere, far beyond the palace walls, faint signals began to move through space, ancient frequencies waking after centuries of silence. The galaxy did not know it yet, but that night when every princess chose the same man, the balance of power began to shift. The laughter that had once filled the court would soon be replaced by whispers. And those whispers carried one name that would echo through the stars: Ryan Hale, the human who made the royal court tremble. The throne room of the Zenthari Empire had never known silence like this. The echoes of the princess's declaration still clung to the walls, heavy and unbroken. No one dared to move. The emperor, once towering and untouchable, sat motionless upon his seat, his eyes filled with disbelief. The guards, confused, stood frozen between their duty and their fear. The nobles whispered quietly among themselves, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Captain Ryan Hale remained still. He stood in the center of the hall, unarmed, unarmored, and yet more commanding than any soldier present. The air around him seemed to hum, as if the galaxy itself listened. The silver sphere in his hand pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat in metal. The princesses stood beside him, silent and steady, their eyes refusing to leave the human. Finally, the emperor spoke, his tone trembling between anger and curiosity. "You stand in my court, human, and you turn my daughters against me. Tell me why I should not have you destroyed where you stand." Ryan looked at him calmly. "Because I am not your enemy," he said. "But I could have been." Gasps rippled across the hall. The High Consul leapt to his feet. You threaten the Emperor? Ryan's voice remained calm. No, I state a truth. The Emperor leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. Then tell us this truth. Tell us where your kind has been. Why did humanity vanish from the stars? Why did you hide from the galaxy you once ruled? Ryan was silent for a moment. Then slowly he stepped forward. The sphere in his hand shimmered and opened like a blooming flower. Light filled the chamber, forming shapes in the air. Vast cities floating above oceans of clouds, endless corridors of starlight, and worlds that no map of the known galaxy had ever marked. This, he said softly, is what you never saw. When humanity disappeared, we did not die. We left. The holograms shifted, showing humans boarding great ships, vessels built from light and thought, powered by something deeper than technology. We left because your empires would not stop warring, because peace was no longer peace, only pauses between bloodshed. We left to build something better, beyond your borders, beyond your wars. The High Consul shouted, Lies! You expect us to believe that your kind, primitive and emotional, could build such worlds? Ryan turned his gaze toward him. Primitive, he repeated quietly. Emotional. Those are the words of a species that confuses power with control. Humanity learned to create not because we were perfect, but because we accepted what you refused to. He raised his hand, and the hologram shifted again. Now it showed a dark void filled with distant glowing eyes, human ships hidden behind veils of black energy. We learned to disappear, to watch, to wait, and when we watched, we saw your empires rise and fall, your peace treaties collapse, your worlds forget their own histories. The Emperor stared at the vision, his voice barely above a whisper. You were watching us all this time. Ryan nodded once. Every empire that ever declared itself eternal, we saw it end. Every tyrant who claimed to rule the stars, we remembered their fall. We hid not from fear but from temptation. Humanity learned that power without discipline destroys all it touches, so we turned our eyes inward, until the galaxy began repeating its mistakes. The chamber trembled faintly as if the weight of his words touched the very air. The nobles shifted uneasily, their faces pale. The High Consul tried to speak again, but his voice failed him. The Emperor rose from his throne, stepping down one slow pace at a time. His presence, once commanding, now seemed smaller. And what brings you back now, human? Ryan's eyes flickered with something deep, almost sorrowful. Because you laughed, he said. Because you mocked what you did not understand. That was how every empire began its fall. I came to remind you before history repeats itself again. The Emperor stood face to face with him now. You mean to say your people wait in the shadows, ready to return? Ryan smiled faintly. We never left. We are in your networks, your trade routes, your colonies. Every communication you send across the stars passes through human-built technology you forgot to question. You rely on ghosts who no longer announce themselves. The realization spread through the court like wildfire. Fear followed it. The nobles whispered in panic. The guards looked to each other for command, and the consul stepped back, pale with disbelief. Princess Elira broke the silence. Her voice was soft but strong. Then why show yourself now? Why reveal what could have remained hidden forever? Ryan looked at her, his expression unreadable. Because the galaxy is changing again. The peace you built is dying. A storm is coming from beyond the rim, beyond the stars you know. Something neither human nor alien. And when it arrives, you will need us. The lights in the hall flickered as if responding to his words. The silver sphere closed in his hand, its glow fading slowly. The Emperor's voice deepened. And if we choose not to accept your help? Ryan's reply was quiet but firm. Then you will burn alone. The Emperor hesitated. You speak like a prophet. Ryan turned toward the great windows of the hall. Outside, the twin moons hung in the endless dark. No, he said softly. Prophets warn of things they have not seen. I have already seen it. For a moment, no one spoke. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. The Emperor stepped back, his pride visibly cracked. The consul whispered to his aides in fear. The princesses exchanged silent glances, realizing that the galaxy they knew was far smaller than they had believed. Ryan began to walk away from the throne, his steps steady and calm. Every eye followed him. As he reached the door, he stopped and turned slightly. Humanity did not disappear, he said. We evolved. We chose patience over pride. But make no mistake, Emperor, if your empire ever again teaches its children to laugh at humanity, Then the stars themselves will remind them why silence followed our name. The great doors opened with a low hum. Ryan stepped out, his figure vanishing into the light. The court remained still, unsure if they had just spoken to a man, a myth, or a warning made flesh. And far beyond the Capitol, in the dark corners of space, something began to move. Massive human ships cloaked in shadow stirred for the first time in centuries. Their engines hummed faintly like the heartbeat of a sleeping god. Humanity had not vanished. It had only been waiting for the right moment to be remembered. The next morning began with a trembling light. The alien skies, always calm and silver, now glowed faintly red at the horizon. The Xanthari capital, an empire once proud and unshaken, felt an unease it had not known in centuries. News of the humans' revelation had spread across every sector. Some called him a prophet. Others whispered that he was a ghost of vengeance come to judge the living. Inside the emperor's private chamber, tension hung like a blade. He stood beside the great window, staring at the twin moons that had watched over his reign. Behind him, the high consul paced nervously. "Your Majesty," the consul said, "this cannot stand. The people whisper his name as if he were a god. He must be silenced before he poisons the galaxy with fear." The emperor did not answer immediately. His old hands rested on the sill, trembling slightly. "You do not understand, consul," he said at last. "We mocked him, yet he carried no anger. He showed us power, yet he spoke only of restraint. That is not the mark of an invader. That is the mark of someone who already owns the stars." Outside the palace, the city stirred uneasily. Pilots in the defense towers reported strange readings. Massive distortions at the edge of their solar system. Unknown ships, cloaked and silent, hovering just beyond detection range. The command officers tried to scan them, but every system that turned toward those coordinates went dark. Far below, in the humans' holding chamber, Ryan Hale stood by the same silver sphere that had once shaken the court. It now glowed brighter than before, pulsing softly like the rhythm of a living heart. The door opened and Princess Elira entered. "They are afraid," she said quietly. "The entire city feels it. The sky looks wrong." Ryan turned toward her, his voice steady. "It is not wrong," he said. "It is remembering." She stepped closer, confusion and awe mixing in her eyes. "Those ships in the outer void, they are yours, aren't they?" He nodded slowly. "They are not here for war. They are here for witness." Elira frowned. "Witness what?" "The end of arrogance," he said softly, "and the beginning of understanding." She hesitated before speaking again. "My father fears you, but I do not. Yet I do not know why." Ryan looked out the window, the red horizon flickering with the faint silhouettes of enormous vessels breaking through the clouds. "Because fear and respect are the same thing," he said. "The difference lies in choice. You chose to listen. He chose to deny." Moments later, a deep vibration rolled through the city. Every spire and tower hummed as if the world itself had drawn a breath. The alarms of the Imperial fleet blared, but the ships stationed in orbit could not move. Every system froze, every engine stilled. The control towers shouted reports of strange interference. The Emperor stormed into the council chamber. "What is happening?" he demanded. His generals bowed in panic. "Massive fleets have appeared around our orbit. Unknown design, unmatched energy readings. We cannot communicate or scan. Our systems are locked." The High Consul's voice shook. "They have surrounded us, Majesty. We are at their mercy." And then, through the wide glass dome of the court, they saw it. The sky split open in a slow, beautiful line of fire. Hundreds of colossal ships emerged from the darkness, sleek, silver, and alive with light. They bore no banners, no threats. Their formation was silent, their weapons unfired. Yet every alien in the court felt the same thing. A deep, primal recognition of power older than their empires. Ryan Hale entered the chamber, unescorted. No one dared stop him. The sphere in his hand glowed bright enough to cast long shadows across the marble floor. He looked up at the Emperor, whose trembling hands gripped the edge of his throne. "Call them off," the Emperor whispered. "Whatever this is, end it." Ryan's gaze was calm. "This is not war," he said. "This is remembrance." He walked to the center of the room and held the sphere high. The walls shimmered, showing holograms of stars, worlds, and galaxies, all connected by faint lines of energy. "These are the systems your empire claims," he said. "Do you see how small they truly are?" The Emperor stared in silence. The nobles bowed their heads. Ryan continued, his voice steady and clear. Humanity does not conquer. We remember. We build. We guard the space between arrogance and extinction. You laughed at us, but laughter does not erase truth. Look outside. Your skies now reflect your mistake. Through the glass, they saw the human fleet forming a vast ring around the planet, each ship pulsing with a faint golden light. Then, without firing a single weapon, every vessel tilted slightly, their lights aligning to the same pattern, the ancient insignia of Earth, the circle and the star. The court gasped. The Emperor fell to his knees, whispering, "The old symbol." Ryan nodded. "It was once a symbol of unity. The galaxy turned it into a myth. Today it becomes memory again." The High Consul shouted, desperate, "You cannot expect us to bow to ghosts."